People who speak two languages have brains that are physically different from monolingual brains. Not metaphorically different. Not just functionally different. Structurally, measurably, visibly different on a brain scan. And the advantages that come from that difference go far beyond simply being able to order food in another country. In this video, you are going to discover exactly what bilingualism does to your brain at a neurological level, why researchers were completely wrong about bilingualism for most of the 20th century, and the one finding that has genuinely stunned the scientific community, a benefit so powerful that pharmaceutical companies are trying to replicate it in a pill. Stay with us, because by the end of this, you will never think about language learning the same way again. For most of human history, people assumed that speaking two languages was a problem. Not an advantage. A problem. Early 20th century educators in the United States and across Europe actively discouraged bilingualism in children. The thinking went like this: if a child's brain has to manage two languages simultaneously, it will get confused, it will slow down, and it will underperform compared to a child who only speaks one language cleanly and confidently. Schools punished children for speaking their home languages in classrooms. Governments launched campaigns promoting monolingualism as a sign of national pride and intellectual clarity. Researchers in the 1920s and 1930s even published studies claiming that bilingual children had lower IQ scores than their monolingual peers. The science seemed settled. Two languages meant a divided, weaker mind. Then something remarkable happened. Researchers started looking more carefully at the data. They found that those early studies were deeply flawed. The bilingual children being tested were often immigrants from poorer families, being compared to wealthier monolingual children. The disadvantage was not linguistic. It was socioeconomic. When researchers controlled for those variables and actually measured what bilingualism did to cognitive function in isolation, the results flipped completely. The turning point came in the 1960s and 1970s, when Canadian researchers Elizabeth Peel and Wallace Lambert published studies showing that bilingual children consistently outperformed monolingual children on both verbal and nonverbal intelligence tests. Not because they were smarter to begin with, but because managing two languages had trained their brains in ways that produced measurable cognitive advantages. That research launched decades of investigation into exactly what those advantages are. And what scientists have found is extraordinary. Here is the first thing you need to understand. When a bilingual person speaks, both of their languages are active in the brain simultaneously. Always. Even when you are only speaking one language, the other one is running in the background, competing for attention. Your brain has to constantly manage that competition, suppressing the language you are not using while activating the one you are. This process happens thousands of times every single day, and it is not passive. It is active cognitive work. Think of it like going to the gym every morning without realizing you are exercising. Every conversation is a workout for the brain regions responsible for attention, inhibition, and executive function. Over time, those regions get stronger, denser, more efficient. This is not a metaphor. Brain imaging studies have shown that bilingual people have significantly more gray matter density in the anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex, two regions directly responsible for attention control and decision-making. A 2004 study by Ellen Białystok and her colleagues at York University tested bilingual and monolingual adults on the Simon task, a classic test of cognitive control where subjects must ignore irrelevant information to respond correctly. Bilingual participants were not just slightly better. They were significantly faster and more accurate, particularly in conditions where the task required overriding automatic responses. The bilingual advantage in executive function was clear, consistent, and reproducible across multiple studies. But here's what nobody talks about. The executive function advantage does not just help with language tasks. It transfers. Bilingual people show enhanced performance in tasks that have nothing to do with language at all, things like multitasking, resisting distraction, switching between competing roles, and making decisions under uncertainty. These are life skills. And speaking two languages builds them automatically, every single day. Now let us talk about the finding that has genuinely shaken the scientific world. The connection between bilingualism and Alzheimer's disease. In 2007, Ellen Białystok published a landmark paper in the journal Neuropsychologia analyzing patient records from a memory clinic in Toronto. What she found stopped researchers in their tracks. Bilingual patients who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease showed the onset of symptoms an average of 4 to 5 years later than monolingual patients with equivalent levels of brain damage. Let that sink in. The same amount of brain deterioration. The same pathology. But the bilingual patients were functioning better, for longer. Their brains had built what researchers now call cognitive reserve, a kind of mental buffer that allows the brain to compensate for damage and keep functioning even as the physical destruction of Alzheimer's progresses. Bilingualism, over a lifetime, builds that reserve more effectively than almost anything else researchers have tested. Subsequent studies in Sweden, Spain, India, and Canada have replicated these findings across different languages, different cultures, and different socioeconomic groups. A 2013 study published in Neurology found that bilingual patients developed dementia symptoms an average of 4.5 years later than monolinguals. A study in India involving over 600 dementia patients found the bilingual advantage held across literate and illiterate populations, ruling out education as the explanatory factor. This is the finding pharmaceutical companies are watching closely. If researchers can identify exactly which mechanisms in the bilingual brain generate cognitive reserve, they may be able to replicate those effects artificially. So far, no drug has come close to producing what a second language produces naturally, over a lifetime of daily use. Beyond dementia protection, bilingualism reshapes the brain in other measurable ways. Research using diffusion tensor imaging has shown that bilingual people have greater white matter integrity in the corpus callosum, the thick band of nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. Better connectivity between hemispheres means faster, more efficient communication across brain regions. It means better creativity, better problem solving, and better integration of information from different cognitive systems. Bilingual children also show advantages in what researchers call theory of mind, the ability to understand that other people have different beliefs, knowledge, and perspectives than you do. Because bilingual children must constantly consider which language their listener speaks and which words will communicate meaning most effectively, they develop a heightened awareness of other people's mental states earlier than monolingual children. Studies show bilingual children pass false belief tasks, classic tests of theory of mind, at earlier ages than their monolingual peers. But here is something worth sitting with. The benefits of bilingualism are not reserved for people who learned a second language as children. Research shows that adults who learn a second language also experience neurological benefits, though the timeline differs. A 2012 study by Thomas Bach at the University of Edinburgh found that even adults who became bilingual later in life showed cognitive advantages over monolinguals of the same age. The brain remains responsive to the challenge of language learning throughout life. It is never too late to start. The depth of immersion matters enormously. People who use both languages regularly and in high-stakes situations, work, relationships, emotional conversations, show stronger neurological effects than people who keep one language for grocery lists and the other for everything important. The brain rewards consistent, meaningful engagement. Passive exposure is not enough. Active use is what builds the cognitive architecture that generates all these advantages. Consider what this means practically. Every time you push yourself to have a difficult conversation in your second language, every time you resist the urge to switch back to your stronger language when you hit a hard word, every time you read, dream, or argue in that second language, you are doing neurological work that compounds over time. You are building a brain that is more resilient, more flexible, more resistant to cognitive decline, and more capable of navigating a complex world. Bilingualism is not a party trick. It is not just a resume bullet point or a travel convenience. It is one of the most powerful cognitive investments a human being can make. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Laying Bridge for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.